Let me tell you something most people never understand until the later years of their lives. Wealth isn't built on secrets, huge risks, or rare opportunities. Wealth is built on a set of simple, predictable rules that almost anyone can follow, yet almost no one does. The reason rich people become rich is not because they are special, but because they follow principles that poor people ignore, avoid, or underestimate. It is not genius. It has not luck. It has discipline, patience, and a respect for reality that most people never develop. And the first rule rich people follow is this: they treat time as their most valuable currency, while poor people treat it as something they can always afford to waste. Poor people behave as if they have infinite tomorrows. They give away their mornings to laziness, their afternoons to distractions, and their evenings to entertainment that gives nothing back. They scroll, binge, gossip, procrastinate, and drift. They measure their days by how quickly they can get through them. Meanwhile, rich people guard their time like a treasure. They know every lost hour is gone forever. They understand that time is the building block of everything: money, relationships, health, success, freedom, and they act like it. They protect their attention. They eliminate distractions. They say no to almost everything. They are ruthless about how their time is spent because they know attention is the gateway to all results. Poor people ask, how long will this take? Rich people ask, how long will this save me? Poor people brag about doing everything themselves. Rich people outsource what drains them so they can focus on what grows them. Poor people trade time for money. Rich people trade money for time. Most people never escape mediocrity because they don't understand this one principle. When you treat your time like it is worth nothing, so is your life. When you treat your time like it is priceless, everything in your life begins to rise to meet that standard. The second rule rich people follow is this: they build skills before lifestyle, while poor people build lifestyle before skills. Poor people increase expenses the moment income rises. They upgrade their car, their apartment, their wardrobe, their social spending. They want to look wealthy more than they want to become wealthy. Their lifestyle grows, but their value does not. Rich people do the opposite. When their income increases, their lifestyle stays the same. Their spending remains boring. Their purchases remain modest. Instead, they invest in their competence. They buy books instead of gadgets. They buy courses instead of designer clothes. They buy tools that increase their ability to produce. They buy environments that force them to improve. Poor people spend money to escape reality. Rich people spend money to improve reality. And here is the truth that feels unfair. Two people can work equally hard, but the one who built valuable skills will earn exponentially more for the same amount of effort. Skills are the great unequalizer. They tilt the entire playing field. A single high-income skill can replace a decade of low-value labor. A single powerful skill can turn you from replaceable to untouchable. And rich people know this. They know that a better lifestyle means nothing without a better mind to sustain it. So they build the mind first and the lifestyle later. Poor people do the opposite and live their entire lives running from the consequences. The third rule rich people follow is that they refuse to spend emotionally, while poor people treat money as a painkiller. Poor people spend when they are stressed, bored, anxious, insecure, lonely, tired, or frustrated. They buy to feel something. They spend to distract themselves from the quality of their life. Their purchases are emotional substitutes, not logical decisions. And every emotional purchase is followed by emotional regret. Rich people are emotionally detached from money. They don't use money to soothe themselves. They don't buy to impress. They don't spend to escape. They make decisions with calm thought, not impulse. They ask one question before every purchase: does this move me forward? Poor people ask, do I feel like buying this right now? And that difference is everything. Emotional spending keeps poor people trapped in cycles of temporary relief and permanent struggle. Rational spending builds stability, options, and freedom. Money flows to calm minds and escapes emotional ones. If you do not control your emotions, you will never control your finances. The fourth rule rich people follow is that they think in decades while poor people think in days. Poor people quit early because they expect progress quickly. They want the reward without the patience. They want results without the process. They want transformation without the timeline. They underestimate how long real change takes. And because they underestimate it, they quit before compounding ever begins working for them. Rich people expect progress to be slow. They expect their early efforts to feel invisible. They understand that the beginning of anything meaningful is quiet, dull, and unimpressive. They are willing to work for years with no applause, no recognition, and no big results because they are building foundations, not moments. Poor people think 1 year is a long time. Rich people think 10 years is short. And that is why their decisions are different. Poor people choose what feels good today. Rich people choose what will matter in 10 years. Poor people panic when results aren't immediate. Rich people trust the math of compounding. They have the emotional maturity to delay gratification long enough to reach outcomes that impulsive people will never see. The fifth rule rich people follow is that they embrace boring consistency while poor people chase exciting distractions. Wealth is not created by dramatic actions, but by small, boring habits performed consistently for years. Tracking expenses, reading daily, investing monthly, improving skills weekly, saying no often, avoiding unnecessary purchases, maintaining discipline even when nobody is watching. These actions don't feel exciting. They don't provide dopamine. They don't look impressive on social media. But they produce results that compound silently until they eventually become visible. Poor people, meanwhile, chase stimulation. They jump from trend to trend. They chase hype, shortcuts, and quick wins. They want excitement more than progress. They want entertainment more than improvement. And that is why their life feels chaotic. Stability comes from consistent behavior, not occasional intensity. Wealth comes from repeating the right things longer than other people are willing to repeat them. Most people never get rich, not because the rules are hard, but because the rules are boring. And yet boredom is exactly where the rewards are hiding. Rich people tolerate boredom, poor people avoid it. But here is the truth that ties everything together. None of these rules require intelligence, privilege, luck, or special circumstances. They require honesty. They require self-awareness. They require the willingness to stop doing what is easy in favor of what is effective. People stay poor because they avoid discomfort. They avoid discipline. They avoid responsibility. They avoid the mirror. They continue the patterns that hold them back and call them normal. But there is nothing normal about living a life controlled by impulse, distraction, and fear. Wealth begins the moment you stop lying to yourself about your habits, about your excuses, about your wasted time, about your emotional spending, about your short-term thinking. When you finally decide that your future matters more than your impulses, everything changes. The gap between rich and poor is not the gap between income levels. It is the gap between behaviors. And once you start behaving like someone who respects time, builds skills, controls emotion, thinks long-term, and practices consistency, your life will begin to rise in ways that seem almost unfair. But it isn't unfair. It's simply the result of living by rules that work. The truth about these 5 rules is that they do not work in isolation. They work as a system quietly shaping every decision, habit, and path you take. And the reason rich people follow them consistently is because they understand that wealth is not a moment, but a philosophy. Not a destination, but a way of thinking. Most people never adopt these rules because they are subtle, unglamorous, and require a level of self-honesty that feels uncomfortable, even painful. But if you observe truly wealthy individuals, those with stability, clarity, and long-term success, you'll notice that their lives are structured around principles rather than impulses. They don't stumble into fortune. They build it through years of choosing discipline over comfort, clarity over chaos, and long-term benefit over short-term pleasure. And the impact of these choices becomes clearer as life progresses, because poor people experience life as a series of emergencies, while rich people experience life as a series of opportunities. Poor people constantly feel behind on bills, behind on goals, behind on obligations because their decisions compound against them. Every emotional purchase makes the next month harder. Every wasted hour makes every future hour more stressful. Every attempt to escape reality makes reality more difficult to return to. Meanwhile, rich people feel ahead, not because life is easier for them, but because every disciplined decision increases their margin of safety. Their financial life has cushions, buffers, and breathing room. Their skills reduce uncertainty. Their long-term thinking reduces anxiety. Their emotional discipline reduces regret. Their consistent habits reduce chaos. Life bends differently for those who prepare for it. And that is why the same world feels entirely different depending on the rules you follow. When a poor person earns more, life gets heavier. When a rich person earns more, life gets lighter. When a poor person faces a problem, it feels devastating. When a rich person faces a problem, it feels solvable. When a poor person makes a mistake, it spirals. When a rich person makes a mistake, it teaches. The rules don't just change your money, they change your entire relationship with life itself. Let's look deeper at how these rules transform real people, because transformation does not happen at once. It happens gradually through behavioral shifts that seem insignificant in the moment. A person who begins guarding their time stops tolerating low-quality relationships, half-hearted commitments, draining conversations, and useless routines. They slowly pull themselves out of environments that suppress them and move into environments that elevate them. A person who begins building skills before lifestyle gradually becomes more capable, more confident, more valuable to the world. Their income rises not by luck, but by alignment aligned with their growing competence. A person who stops emotional spending learns how to face life honestly. Instead of shopping their way out of discomfort, they start addressing the roots of their discomfort: loneliness, boredom, insecurity, lack of purpose, lack of structure. Their financial life stabilizes because their emotional life stabilizes. A person who begins thinking in decades stops rushing decisions. They stop panicking at slow progress. They stop feeling behind just because someone else is ahead. They realize their timeline is unique and that compounding cannot be accelerated but can always be interrupted, and they choose not to interrupt it. And finally, a person who practices boring consistency becomes unstoppable because consistency is the most powerful force ordinary people can access. You don't need talent to be consistent. You don't need opportunity, luck, or privilege. You only need the willingness to repeat the right behavior long enough for it to matter. Boring habits turn into extraordinary results when given enough time. But the average person quits because boredom feels like failure, when in reality, boredom is the sign you have finally found something sustainable. The quiet truth most people never realize is that rich people are not extraordinary. They are simply consistent. They consistently guard their time. They consistently build skills. They consistently detach emotions from money. They consistently plan for the long term. They consistently practice the same dull habits that compound over years. And while poor people judge those habits as restrictive, boring, or unnecessary, rich people understand those habits are the foundation that gives them freedom. The person who avoids discipline ends up living a life full of consequences. The person who embraces discipline ends up living a life full of options. Over the years, these differences accumulate into entirely different destinies. And here is the hardest truth of all. Nothing changes until you admit that your current financial life is a reflection of your current patterns. Not your parents, not your coworkers, not the economy, not your circumstances, your patterns. And that is not an insult, it is an invitation. Because if your patterns created your current situation, then new patterns can create a new life entirely. When you begin following the rules rich people live by, you begin reshaping the architecture of your future. You begin eliminating the silent leaks that drain you. You begin removing the habits that suffocate you. You begin distancing yourself from people who keep you small. You begin building a life that feels more stable, more intentional, more yours. You begin to feel control again. And that feeling control is the first sign of real wealth. Before money changes, the mind changes. Before the bank account grows, the character grows. Before you see visible results, you develop invisible discipline. Wealth is an internal transformation long before it becomes an external one. Once you internalize these rules, your decisions naturally shift. You no longer chase validation because you understand that validation is a cheap substitute for meaning. You no longer chase distractions because you understand that distractions cost you the only currency you cannot earn back. You no longer chase short-term pleasure because you understand that long-term peace is worth infinitely more. You no longer chase appearances because you understand that a strong foundation is more valuable than an impressive facade. And slowly your life begins to compound in the right direction. With each small improvement, your capacity grows. With each disciplined choice, your confidence rises. With each long-term decision, your future becomes clearer. The beauty of these rules is that anyone can adopt them. You don't need to be born wealthy. You don't need a special background. You don't need a special mind. You simply need to choose a different set of habits than the ones that keep most people trapped. Wealth is not reserved for the gifted. It is reserved for the disciplined. These rules work because they align with the fundamental laws of compounding slow, steady, intentional effort repeated over years. And when you finally stop living by impulse and start living by principle, you separate yourself from the masses without even trying. While others panic, you stay calm. While others quit, you continue. While others chase noise, you build systems. While others drift through life, you build a life worth living. And in the end, that is the greatest reward of all, not just the money, but the person you become along the way. The person who respects time, the person who values growth, the person who thinks before spending, the person who prioritizes the future, the person who repeats the right habits, even when they are boring. This is what wealth truly is. The consistency of small choices aligned with a purpose, large enough to guide them. And when you live by these 5 rules long enough, people will call you lucky. But you'll know the truth. It wasn't luck at all. It was discipline disguised as destiny.